Learning so much more about Vancouver's community has really shown us all the progress that's been made. It feels like our city is literally bursting with queer energy right now, and things have never felt this hopeful.
So now we want to dive into another huge part of Queer Vancouver, and that's our nightlife scene. Queer events and places to gather are so important for us all to connect, but we know that it hasn't always been easy to maintain these spaces in the city.
Nightlife is such an essential part of our community, and so we want to know, what does Vancouver's queer nightlife look like today?
What I really loved about when I came here was the nightlife was really alive. When I look back at the queer community and the people that were finding their way, a lot of times they literally had to separate themselves from their family, like I did. And you didn't really have those family units. So when you went to the spaces, that's where you found your family. That was your living room. So maybe you didn't really have anywhere to kind of go in the day, but you could go to a club and nobody knew that. No matter what your story is, if you're in this space and we're together, you're safe and you can be yourself.
If I think about just sort of like how trying life can be, how difficult life can be, we all have sort of our own things going on in our personal life. I really do think that there's something so revolutionary of being able to just show up on a dance floor and just move and be around friends and community. I think that just to have that small bit of catharsis, even if that's just like an hour on a Saturday night, I really do think that that is important for connection.
The world at large is straight. So when you go out to the supermarket and you go to the coffee shop and you're just living your day-to-day life, like you're not really feeling the impact, say, that like queer people are feeling, and events and parties and all the little things we do. Like, these are the things that make us feel together. Like, these are the things that we go to and go, okay, look around and I see myself in these people. I feel safe here. I feel welcomed here. I can relax. I can kiss my partner. I can hold their hand and not even have to worry about it, not even have to think twice. I just don't think that the world at large understands how important queer nightlife is to our community. It's quite literally sometimes all that we have.
When we talk about nightlife for the queer community, the first thing people probably think of is drag. And Vancouver definitely has a lively drag scene that has really evolved over the years.
We want to learn more about what drag looks like in today's community, so we need to talk to a couple of Vancouver's drag experts.
My name is Paige Frewer. I also go by Ponyboy. My pronouns are they, them. I am one of the 4 people who founded Man Up, and I also co-operate Eastside Studios. I would define drag as a language for queer folks to articulate the absurdity of gender. For so many of us, gender is hilarious, and just the ways that we define masculinity and femininity. Gender is like a traumatic thing for a lot of people, and being in their bodies and being treated the way that they are by society or their families or whatever, when that is at odds with who they are, it's like painful. And so, like so many things, you know, an access point to reconciling that pain is humor. And I think that's like really seems to me like how drag was born.
This is a celebration of the art of drag. Well, when I came to Vancouver, I had started drag in Calgary previously. So in 2022, I will have been doing drag for 30 years. It's been crafted into my journey of self-discovery. It's always been part of it. As I've got to know myself over the years, I still keep really deep rooted with the drag community because I have a huge respect for it, for the history of it, and the fact that people were doing drag when it wasn't safe to do it, because that was how they expressed themselves through their artistry, but also through the person as the identity. It has been political. It has been a place that has been like a lifeline for a lot of people to express themselves. It has been an art form that people have developed craft.
It's wonderful how much drag has grown, and that has been a really important process for the increasing safety and visibility for so many people. And I think that, we can hold dear to our hearts that like it's ours. There's still kind of an element of it that's like a little bit lost on the broader straight community, which I kind of cherish. Like it's like there's just nuance to it that that you can recognize if you are of that experience and of the queer communities.
It's a place for people to come and to escape, to be able to celebrate the spectrum of identity, the celebration of expression, but also the fierce artistry that drag represents.
Man Up started March 2008 as a drag king competition and then show, bringing kinging kind of back to the scene because it sort of ebbs and flows, and it had been an ebb in that moment. There wasn't a huge thing in Vancouver yet of like gender bendy drag, and it has evolved to be a multi-gender drag showcase. I feel like it's just we're a little post-gender or something, This
is such a special event. Like today, it's the 14th anniversary of Man Up, and I am so excited to have you all here. Thank you for coming. Thanks for coming, you guys.
Performing on stage to a queer audience is really special because I think that's where, when I say that drag is something, special to queer folks, that's where that feeling comes from, is when you get to be sharing in this expression that is like really fun and silly, but also entertaining and political.
One of the things that I love about performing today is the fact that I get to be part of people finding their space where they fit in. And I've always loved it myself, to express myself through my artistry as a makeup artist, as a stylist, as a performer, and now as an advocate. This is something that it's an art form. It really is something that it helps me come alive when I'm able to be on stage and to share presentation through music and through transformation.
That you have lived experience and lived, challenges that you're sharing with the crowd. There's something that is like different about being kind of in it together, that you're touching them, in a way, and like helping people by giving them this like moment of joy and this reminder that what happens outside of these four walls is like, not always easy, but we like have this.
Queer nightlife spaces really do so much to bring our community together and give people a safe place to just be themselves away from the outside world. And being able to appreciate drag artists and watch performances in a space with other queer people is really special.
We are so impressed with this city's drag scene. And now we want to know, who are some of the other queer performers and artists that make up our local nightlife here in Vancouver?
My name is Bella C. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a DJ. I work in events. I'm Rice Cake Zaddy. And I worked corporate DJ events and like weddings out in the burbs for quite a long time. So I really got my DJ experience there, and I was really coming into my own. I kind of retired from that corporate scene and was like starting to get more opportunities within the queer community. And this community that just kind of like grew organically through common threads like music, through just being in the same space. That's kind of how I crossed over from corporate DJing into like DJing for my community. So it was honestly like just a very natural like osmosis. And I feel so blessed for that.
Well, music has been in my life like since I was a baby. My mother would play Motown records. I grew up listening to vinyl. I remember scratching her vinyl a few times. I got in trouble for that, but just scratching and playing around with music, it's just always been there, and I've always wanted people to have a good time. Like I've always been like that since I was 13, making mix CDs for friends, putting my voice on there, and the fact that I'm able to turn it into a business now and make people really, really happy with the music I play and actually get paid for it is pretty amazing.
For me, DJing is so much less about like playing the perfect newest music or doing like the most technically perfect mix, and it's so much more to me about the connection with the people who are in the crowd. I kind of got into it accidentally. I didn't sort of set out thinking that it would be such a big part of my identity and my community, and I think from the inception of my DJing, it also went hand in hand with organizing events and like aiming to create spaces where folks can gather in a way that's maybe more intentional or more thoughtful.
I think with DJing, people smile at you with their eyes. Like if you play their favorite song, they look at you like you're a queen, like you're a goddess, you know? And I'm just like, wow, I have the ability to do that for people. I'm like a hip hop artist now. I just want to kind of see where that goes. We're really lucky if you get to find your life's passion and you get to work and get paid for it.
DJing in a queer space is my favorite thing in the world. For me to be able to hold space for folks and to play a song and see people like smile and scream, it really makes me feel like such a deep sense of joy and gratitude to be able to like foster a space.
We play music, we both sing, we write songs, and we're a baby band. We just started. Ocean and I have a couple songs that we've written together.
As Glow Motive.
Our objective is just to write music and have a lot of fun and make tunes that share our hearts. I would say there's like an underlying queerness to our sound and our songs. Ocean put out like a whole album with their project Oatmeal Queen.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to the music and I was like, oh, I want to make music with this person. I think honestly it's so rare to find someone that like mirrors who you are. Like I see so much of that between Ocean and I. And so I feel like when we make music and we put our spirits into our songs and let our songs go out, it draws in our people.
There aren't a lot of like South Asian queer bands in this place at this time.
I think we meet a lot of intersections of like queerness, South Asian musicians.
So I did piano lessons and I did classical piano through my youth, and I started writing songs when I was about 9, I think.
For me, I also started piano lessons very young. I was part of choir, band. It's our objective to just be us and do us, and I believe that magnetizes our people to us. There's someone in the audience that sees themselves in you, in what you're doing, and then more queer artists are birthed.
My name is Skylar Love. I'm a local Vancouver DJ and event producer.
I am celebrating this year my 20th anniversary of producing queer events in Vancouver. I'd always kind of been into music as a kid. I played a lot of different instruments, and
I started DJing when I was 15 years old. At the time I identified as female, there really wasn't a lot of female DJs. So I had a lot of things like working against me. I was young, I was queer, I was female, and the DJ scene was very much so like a men's like club.
I really had to learn in a very like unique, really underground kind of really limited way. And that was like back when nothing was digital, like everything was still vinyl and turntables and stuff. So it was just much harder. It wasn't nearly as accessible.
So I spent 2 years just kind of DJing in my bedroom and just having big dreams.
Nobody wanted to book me. And so I just thought to myself, like, if nobody's gonna book me, I'm just gonna start, putting on my own events, and I'll just book myself to DJ. And so that took off when I was 18. Out of that, I basically built up, who I am today. I came here in the hopes and dreams of in the pursuit of becoming like a superstar DJ, and I just didn't stop.
I've done this for 20 years. I actually literally don't know life without it. I'll probably be 80 years old, like still creating community, because this is what I can do. I can die happy doing this.
I present a lot, and over time I was starting to just improvise a lot of presentations, and then that improvised presentations became just sort of this stream of consciousness, and that evolved into my poetry, into my art, which is why I love to improvise on stage. And all my pieces are very stream of consciousness, and they just flow.
I don't want to be brave.
I don't need to be an inspiration, as if every action I make, every step forward I take is enough cause for celebration. Why should we have to be brave? It's so amazing to perform in trans and queer explicit spaces because there's a level of getting it that trans and queer audiences have where I don't have to explain the context. And that's why I think it's so important to have like spaces for not just queer and trans people, but any person that's marginalized, where they don't have to be around people that they have to explain anything to.
Queer spaces are so incredibly important to our community. And as we've seen, spaces in Vancouver have come and gone over the years with a real lack of permanent venues for queer women, trans people, and other marginalized folks.
About 20 years ago, that all changed when a space called Lick opened up, and it lasted for nearly a decade. It started out as a lesbian bar, but what it evolved into and what it did for the entire queer community in Vancouver was so much more.
From the very first day Lick was born, I was there. When Lick first started up, it did start up as like a lesbian, like women's bar.
The culture was different. The way we all identified was quite different. And so the first year of it being open, it was really celebrated that it was a women's space. Then it started becoming like women and their friends or lesbians and their friends. And then, within a year after that, it just really switched to it being a queer bar. But everybody always knew that it centered around a lot of female identifying people, but we didn't really have to have that language anymore. And that put the pressure on the men's bars and the men's spaces to also, change their language and become more inclusive. And it was kind of like we watched, like right before our very eyes, we watched the culture and the inclusion culture in Vancouver really shift. I used to joke to my friends, I'd be like, guys, like we're making history right now. This is history in the making. Like, this is going to be something that we speak about 20 years from now. It's amazing because like here I am 20 years later and it is history now. When you go to where Lick was, outside on the wall of the club is a placard that the city actually put up, and it's a historical placard for the LGBTQ community. And on that placard it speaks about Lick and it speaks about the community and like what happened there. The closure of Lick in 2011, it was really devastating. At the same time, it pushed people in the community to evolve and to grow from that and to start creating and producing, events and spaces of like what we have today.
Lick had a huge impact on the local community at the time, and it really did transform Vancouver's queer nightlife culture. And even though it's another club on the long list of those we've lost, it helped to lay the groundwork for what we're seeing in the city now when it comes to inclusive queer spaces.
Now we have spaces like the Warehouse, East Side Studios.
The concept was that this would be, a party space by night, and then like a, artist studio space by day. Those of us who like run East Side are all queer and gender diverse and all like artists. So there's just nothing that can compare to that. It's really important for queer women and trans folks to have spaces like this.
Eastside Studios is a pillar in queer Vancouver today, the same way that Lick was back then. And not only is it a safe space for queer women and trans people, it's also a venue that has become home to some incredible events that center racialized folks in the queer community.
So Rice Cake is Vancouver's premier queer Asian dance party. And all throughout, it's got queer Asian representation all throughout it, on stage, behind the stage, and in the audience. I feel that Rice Cake really creates a safe space for the queer Asian community, and I think it's so required and like necessary, especially in Vancouver, because not only is there a very large Asian population and a large gay population, but oftentimes those two worlds, like sometimes they intersect all the time, but sometimes the intersection is not a very smooth process. So I think that creating like a queer Asian space is that much more important, because for a kid like me who once never had that space, like that could be life-changing. Like especially after COVID, like I think about all the anti-Asian violence that's happened. I think also about the queer youth who maybe are coming into their adulthood, coming out of COVID, and are like wanting to experience what nightlife is for the first time, but like maybe like all this anti-Asian violence and like anti-LGBTQ violence is like a little bit harrowing and maybe kind of scary. So having a space where those two lives are not only normalized but are like exalted, like in the highest regard, like I think is essential.
So Level Up is a queer, BIPOC-centered hip-hop dance party. It's the only event in the city that is a queer space that centers BIPOC folks and plays hip-hop music, so that's really important to me. And I just sort of felt this need to create a space that celebrated hip-hop culture and rap and that music and Black culture in a way that didn't feel appropriative or exploitative. So I created Level Up with the goal of, centering that culture, but having it run by and centering folks who are part of that culture. For many folks who exist within racialized communities, they're often forced to think of sort of their race and their queerness as two separate things. So it was important for me to carve out space to specifically celebrate folks, who were like me, who had similar experiences to me, who, could maybe experience joy in queer spaces, but then were still experiencing elements of racism. It became important to me to make spaces specifically for BIPOC folks, recognizing sort of the way that our identities are composed of many different components, and that it's not enough to just have BIPOC spaces and just have queer spaces, but to have spaces that center and celebrate queer folks of color. The feedback that I've gotten from members in the community is that, spaces like this have been really lacking, and that, that a lot of folks of color have had to sort of insert themselves in either spaces that are queer, but maybe predominantly white, or spaces that are for, people of color, but aren't queer. So I think that for a lot of folks, what I've heard is that being able to show up in a space where they get to be their full selves and know that this space is dedicated for folks to show up as their full selves is really important and meaningful.
I only have positive things to say about Eastside Studios, and I'm so stoked that they host our event all the time, because everything they do aligns with what we are trying to create. So it just kind of like makes it a perfect fit.
Having, a venue that is actively committed to like learning and doing better and like accepting feedback and making changes and working collaboratively with event producers, that's not something you're gonna find everywhere in the city.
It seems like over time, Vancouver has learned how important it is to have a diverse range of queer events and spaces so that everyone, and especially marginalized folks, feel like they have a place. And that includes people of color as well as the trans community.
Trans-specific spaces are so important because a lot of people don't know that they're trans yet, and especially because we work with youth, we also work with elders. A lot of people at even any point in their journey, because it wasn't safe, or they didn't have people to look up to, or they didn't have anybody, even on TV or whatever that was trans, they need the space to be with other trans people to even ask those questions. We do a lot of different events at the Trans Haven. In terms of the practicalities of the event, we'll do things like drag, always, poetry, music, definitely like interesting and experimental music. We like to showcase kind of like electronic stuff, DJs, dancing. And we always have people after our events, at least so far, every single time there's been people who have DM'd us, who have messaged us being like, okay, I'm like figuring out that I might want to like add a they them pronoun, or I might be trans feminine, or I might be trans masculine. It might not make sense to like cis normativity, but in this space we can not only just affirm, but we can celebrate, and we can create future, and we can like evolve who we are.
This might be one of the most positive ways that Queer Vancouver has changed over the past several decades. There's been an expansion in the community that's giving everyone room to create their own home and find where they belong.
If I see a lack in Vancouver where I'm like, there's not spaces for South Asian non-binary musicians, I can carve out that space and call in my family.
Not all spaces are supposed to be for everyone as well.
It's just creating a space for a specific community. It's not saying that others are not welcome, but it's just a moment for that community to just shine in the light for a moment.
There are tensions around that because I think the dominant group thinks, oh, solidarity. We need to have solidarity. We need to all stand together. And if you break away into this subgroup, you're not having solidarity. You're weakening the community. No, actually, they're strengthening the community.
It's really important to carve out spaces for all the voices. And 10, 15 years ago, carving out queer spaces was important. And now we're pushing forward. It's as important, if not more important, to create space to center other marginalized voices within the community.
Well, as the world opens up and as the world evolves, as we focus on making sure that we continue to push the rights of our freedoms for every person, that there's a responsibility and an opportunity for our communities to really rise up and make sure that we're creating those spaces.
People of different, marginalized identities, people of color, right? Having those spaces is so important so that they can know what is their community and what is their experience.
I think that's like the strength of the queer community, is to make the places that we dream of.
While of course there's still work to do in the local queer community today, it's so important that we recognize how far we've come and all the progress that we've made over the years.
It's been really cool to see the changes in the queer community. It's really different from 10 years ago to now.
Vancouver's queer community today is really expanding and growing. I've seen so many new cool events pop up. I've seen so many, diverse DJs and parties, and I just think that it's so cool to watch the community grow and expand.
Queer community gets to be this like arena where we are sort of on the forefront of anti-oppression frameworks and ways of thinking and being. I think queer and trans and BIPOC communities are even more so like in tune with how we need to be learning and always like unlearning.
The culture, the inclusivity culture here is like above and beyond, and it's awesome. It's something I feel proud of, and as like a space creator and an event creator and a community creator here in this city, like I feel really like proud of that.
Queer Vancouver today might be the strongest it's ever been, but despite all the ways the community has grown and how much we've gained, we still see some of the same patterns of history repeating itself in this city.
We have always known that the time here would be temporary because St. Paul's Hospital is being built next door, and there is a mixed-use condo development happening on this land. But as these things go, it's unclear exactly when we will, reach the end of our lease. We've been just kind of like squeezing every last bit of joy and queerness we can out of the building while we can.
This is so special. We've thought so many times that we were going to lose this space, and we think that it's our last few months, and then we get another few months, so it's pretty awesome.
Our home at Eastside Studios is so like near and dear to my heart, truly, because it's like the only queer run venue in the city, like authentically queer run from the ground up. But I do have full faith that they'll find a spot. I just don't know when or where it could be.
I don't know what I will do when Eastside Studios closes, but I have a odd, perhaps naive sense of knowing that things will work out.
I have some faith and some hope in my heart that like something new and really exciting is coming. I don't have fear around the end of Eastside Studios. I have hope, and I can't entirely explain that.
We just keep going, and every time we lose a space, which it happens often, we pick up and we keep going,
The queer community will always find a way to connect and be together. It doesn't matter how many times we face the same obstacles, we will persevere no matter what. The most amazing thing about the people in this city is how dedicated everyone is to creating something beautiful for all of us.
We feel incredibly thankful to have learned so much about Queer Vancouver. And we're really hopeful that this community will only continue to get stronger as we move into the future.